Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking, a really fascinating mystery. We're looking at two neighbors, Spain and Portugal. They share the exact same peninsula, they share a border, and honestly, they share a lot of the same core ingredients. But if you sit down for dinner in Madrid and then take a quick trip over to Lisbon, you're going to find two drastically different culinary identities. It's like two different worlds. So how exactly did that happen? Let's unpack this delicious puzzle together.
Okay, let's dive right into this. On a broad cultural level, the food scenes perfectly mirror the energy of the countries themselves, right? Spain feels loud, bold, energetic. Its food is heavily based on contrast and is deeply tied to these highly social, bustling tapas bars. Portugal, on the other hand, well, it feels a little softer. Its cuisine is quiet, understated, and intensely focused on nostalgia comfort. It's traditionally served in these cozy, seated taverns known as tascas. Which begs a pretty massive question. How exactly did two neighbors, starting out with nearly identical geographic and climatic conditions, end up with cuisines that taste and feel entirely different? To figure out what's on the plate today, we kind of have to play culinary detective and trace their steps back through history.
Section 1. The Historical Divergence.
Our timeline actually starts with the Roman Empire, which gave both regions a shared foundation. We're talking wheat, wine, and olive oil. Then jump to the 8th century. The Moors from North Africa arrive, bringing citrus, rice, and spices. But here is where the split really starts to happen. During the Christian retaking of the Peninsula, the Reconquista, Portugal actually pushed the Moors out much faster than Spain did. Because of this, Portugal's food stayed simpler. It's more rustic and purely Atlantic. Meanwhile, Spain's southern cuisine held on to a heavy, complex Moorish influence, especially when it comes to deep frying and really intense spice blends.
Then came the Age of Discovery, and wow, this cemented a massive divergence. While Spain was out building a global empire, bringing back literal ships full of wealth and New World ingredients, things like tomatoes, potatoes, and cacao, Portugal took a totally different route. They focused heavily on global trade routes, quietly seasoning their national cuisine with Indian spices, African grilling techniques, and unique Brazilian produce. This divergence in the spice trade, this is the exact moment their culinary DNAs split forever. It's absolutely crucial to understanding their food today.
Now, what's really fascinating is how perfectly that historical spice trade divergence maps onto their modern pantries. Take a look at the primary seasonings. Spain leans hard into bold, dramatic flavors, smoked paprika, saffron. Portugal, though, uses gentle, warming spices they picked up from their global roots, cinnamon and bay leaves, alongside the fiery African piri-piri. You even see this exact same split in their cured meats. Spain has the world-famous jamón ibérico and chorizo, while Portugal boasts completely different creations, like the Alhira sausage.
Section 2. Distinct flavor profiles. Let's look a bit closer at these flavors. Over in Spain, the undisputed king of the spice cabinet is pimentón. This is a smoky paprika that brings a bold, dramatic flavor and a very distinctive, woodsy smokiness to literally everything it touches. I mean, from sausages to stews. Spanish cuisine loves contrast, hot and cold, sweet and salty. And pimentón provides that loud, robust baseline for their highly expressive dishes. Contrast that with Portugal's piri-piri. This is a fiery chili sauce derived from those African trade routes we just talked about. But here's the fascinating part. Despite this really famous spicy outlier, Portuguese food is rarely spicy. Actually, scratch that. It's almost never spicy. Instead of shouting with heat, traditional Portuguese cuisine prefers to whisper. They use black pepper, cinnamon, and cloves to create a subtle, deeply comforting warmth.
You can really see this when we lay out Portugal's quiet pantry. It relies heavily on just copious amounts of garlic and olive oil, backed by bay leaf and fresh herbs, mostly coriander down in the south and parsley up in the north. They build incredible depth of flavor through slow cooking, braising, and very minimal sauces. It's all about respecting the raw ingredients above all else.
Spain's dramatic pantry, on the other hand, is all about layering. It often starts with a sofrito, which is a slow-cooked base of tomatoes, onions, and garlic, and builds intensity using saffron, sweet and smoked paprika, and sherry vinegar. It's a culinary philosophy that really embraces complex sauces to elevate simple ingredients into something truly spectacular. Section 3. The role of the sea.
And this brilliantly illustrates how geography shaped their diets. Both nations absolutely love seafood, for sure, but notice the stark difference in daily consumption. The average Portuguese person consumes 164 grams of fish and seafood every single day, compared to Spain's 111 grams. To put that into perspective, that means Portugal eats a staggering 3.5 times the world average. Their identity is completely undeniably tethered to the Atlantic Ocean.
Which brings us to a rather wonderful irony. Portugal's national obsession is Bacalhau, salted cod. They famously claim to have 365 ways to prepare it, literally one for every day of the year. Yet, cod isn't even caught in their local waters. No way. This obsession is a direct legacy of their seafaring history, where they needed techniques like salting and drying to preserve fish for those really long global maritime voyages.
So while Portugal's seafood philosophy is purely Atlantic, meaning they favor minimal intervention, like simply throwing some fresh sardines over a charcoal grill, Spain is split. Spain actually has coastlines on both the wild Atlantic and the much calmer Mediterranean. This dual exposure led to a much wider variety of techniques, from the light frying you see in Andalusia to the really complex saffron-infused seafood paellas of the eastern coast.
Section 4. The Modern Plate.
Now, despite that massive seafood intake, here's a statistic that might actually shock you. 430 grams. That is the amount of meat consumed daily per person in Portugal today. As the country's economy grew over the last half-century, they leaned heavily into their love for rustic, hearty stews featuring pork, beef, and an amazing array of traditional smoked sausages.
When you break down the overall Portuguese daily food volume, you see a culture that genuinely prioritizes eating well. Even with those hearty meats, their diet totals over 2,400 grams a day and leans massively on fresh produce and high-carb comfort. In fact, if you order a meal in Portugal, it's incredibly common to be served both rice and potatoes on the exact same plate, just to soak up all those rich, savory sauces.
Let's move on and see how this all builds together. We know what they eat, and we know the history of how those ingredients arrived, especially with that spice trade divergence. But how do these two distinct philosophies actually translate into their daily dining rituals?
Section 5. Culture of the table. The contrast here is, well, it's night and day. Spain is famous for the tapeo, a highly social, often totally unstructured ritual of standing, bar hopping, and sharing small plates with friends. And they usually start dinner very late, well after 9 p.m. Portugal is the exact opposite. Dining in traditional tascas is a structured, seated affair, focused on large, composed plates. It's much more about settling in for a comforting, home-style meal, typically starting closer to 8 p.m.
So the crucial point is that Portuguese dining has a very specific, unified rhythm. You sit down, and it almost always follows these exact steps. It starts with a couver of bread and olives, then a daily soup, like caldo verde. This is followed by a hearty, composed main dish, and it always ends with a strong shot of espresso. In Spain, they might just order another drink, but in Portugal, the espresso is like the mandatory period at the end of the culinary sentence.
It's a truly remarkable paradox, isn't it? Two totally distinct culinary identities born from a shared starting line. The Roman and Moorish foundations were exactly the same, but the speed of the Reconquista, and most importantly, the massive divergence during the global spice trade, well, it sent them down entirely different paths. Spain learned to shout with bold tapas, while Portugal learned to whisper with spiced, structured comfort.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for you. Which culinary philosophy do you actually resonate with more? Are you drawn to the bold, late-night social energy of Spanish tapas? Or do you crave the quiet, structured, and hearty comfort of a Portuguese meal? Whichever you choose, understanding the history behind the plate makes every single bite that much better. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to go taste this history for yourself.